Welcome, Gunrunner.
I'm pretty sure that anyone with an interest in retro gaming is more than aware of the amazing NEC PC engine. The console was first released to Japanese customers in October 1987, where it quickly took the market by storm, creating a genuine rival to Nintendo's market-leading Famicom. Designed by Hudson Soft and manufactured and marketed by electronics giant NEC, it also featured a 6502 based 8-bit CPU like Nintendo's machine, albeit a much faster one, but its custom 16-bit graphics hardware and highly adaptable 6-channel sound chip raised it well above its competition. It wasn't long before import consoles started to make it into other parts of the world, and rumours of a worldwide release gained significant traction. NEC soon announced plans to release the PC engine in North America as the TurboGrafx-16, to kickstart the 16-bit console war in the West and make another play at Nintendo's market dominance. Unfortunately, history tells us that the TurboGrafx-16 wasn't a commercial success, and because of that it was often ignored and derided in favour of its Japanese sibling, as retro game collecting became a thing. But there was renewed interest in the brand with the release of the TurboGrafx Mini, more on that later, and now it's become extremely collectible. In this video I aim to bring even more exposure to the TurboGrafx and reveal some of the most interesting stories and pieces of trivia surrounding the console, 10 of them in fact, so let's get going with these amazing TurboGrafx facts.
PC エンジン512色スーパービジュアル6チャンネルリアルサウンドニューワールドを制覇する PC エンジン全開 NEC から。
As already mentioned in the introduction, the TurboGrafx-16 arrived nearly 2 years after the debut of the PC engine in Japan, and many people have questioned why. It's often been speculated that the release of the TG-16 only came about because NEC had heard about the impending launch of the Sega Genesis in America and wanted to get in on the action. If you dig a bit deeper into this further, you'll see that both consoles were released in August 1989, with Sega's 16-bitter hitting shelves just 2 weeks earlier. Had NEC planned ahead a bit better and perhaps had more faith in the abilities of their own console, they could have secured a pretty decent foothold in North America before Sega even got out the door. Given the PC engine hit the market a full year ahead of the Mega Drive in Japan, they had every opportunity to launch in other parts of the world first too. This poor decision making will just have to go down as another what if moment in the history of the video game industry. With dimensions of just 14cm by 14cm by 3.8cm, the Japanese PC engine is still credited as being the smallest major home games console ever, and people still continue to be surprised by just how small it is when they first see one, especially if they are more familiar with the Western model of the machine. So why was the TurboGrafx-16 so much bigger than the PC engine? Well, you can blame this on American consumers. Various focus groups have shown that people in the US strongly believe that bigger is always better, something that was very much proved by American cars when compared to automobiles manufactured in other parts of the world. Interestingly, Atari faced the same design decision when they came up with the original Lynx, but at least they did correct this with a later redesign. Just to back this up a bit, if anyone out there wants to open up their TG-16, they will find that the inside of that sleek plastic case is mostly empty. A lot was made of NEC's advertising and marketing of the TurboGrafx, who very much promoted it as a 16-bit console, hence the suffix on its name, especially when comparing it to the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, which were both seen by consumers as proper 16-bit consoles. This was very much the point that the whole bit wars started, and NEC were even accused of misleading people by some of the press. Similar criticisms were also aimed at the Atari Lynx and Atari Jaguar too. But was it really that disingenuous? I'd strongly argue that it wasn't. In my opinion, the supposed bitness of a console should refer to its strongest processing ability. So because the TurboGrafx-16 has a 16-bit GPU, that means that it can display graphics that are often every bit as good as its rivals. So for this reason, it should definitely be regarded as a 16-bit console. Unlike home computers of the time, consoles of this era relied heavily on their custom graphics and sound processors to do much of the work, with the CPU acting more like a manager in many cases. And the TurboGrafx-16 is a great example of this. Despite the Western version of NEC's debut console being massively redesigned aesthetically, almost no changes were made to it internally. This was made evident by things like the single joypad port, RF-only video output, and lack of a power light. These all ended up being chief criticisms of the console when compared to its rivals, and something that NEC had to fix with add-ons. The first of these was the Turbo Booster. This attached to the back of the system via its well-covered expansion port and allowed it to output composite video as well as stereo audio too. Then there was the Turbo Tap that plugged into the single controller port and split it into 5, absolutely essential for multiplayer titles like Bomberman. These didn't help that much though, as potential customers were still put off by having to fork out for expensive and bulky extras to add functions that should have been already standard out of the box. One of the few changes they did make to the internal hardware of the TurboGrafx-16 when compared to the PC Engine though, is making the games incompatible. Although they both used Hudson Soft's incredibly innovative HuCard format, they changed the order of the pins as a lockout measure. However, this rather simple security technique made it very simple to produce adapters to play Japanese games on Western consoles. These adapters soon became an almost essential purchase for TG16 owners, as NEC failed to bring many of the system's best games to the West, thus crippling the console's success and overall attraction. Many of the magazines of the time heavily criticised the decision not to bring more of the outstanding Japanese library across the continents. Earlier in this video I discussed the small form factor of the original PC Engine console. This size meant that the system was a perfect candidate to be adapted into a handheld. Over in Japan, NEC came out with 2 different portable configurations that each had their own advantages. Firstly, there was the PC Engine LT, which was basically a laptop version of the existing console with a built-in screen that could be folded down, ideal for long journeys and holidays. Secondly, and more importantly for this video, there was the PC GT, a fully handheld version of the PC Engine that followed a similar design aesthetic to the Nintendo Game Boy and could be taken anywhere. Unlike the LT, the GT would make it over to North America where it was rebranded as the Turbo Express. Lusted over by gamers everywhere, this handheld ultimately proved far too costly to generate any real commercial success, and was soon left behind by its 3 main rivals in the Nintendo Game Boy, Sega Game Gear and Atari Lynx. I don't think enough people are aware that the PC Engine was the first console to have a CD add-on. The PC Engine CD-ROM, later known as the Super CD, was originally released in Japan just over a year after the console itself, in December 1988. Initially it offered no real technical improvements over the standard hardware other than the ability to use CD-based soundtracks and of course all the extra storage. But a series of special enhancement cards would later change this. These slotted into the PC Engine's HuCard port and added extra RAM, which was especially useful for ports of fighting games from the rival Neo Geo arcade console. A redesigned CD-ROM add-on followed in the West, renamed the Turbo CD, which was now attached directly to the back of the system, rather than the side, with no extra bridge device needed. The Super System card soon followed, but not the later arcade card, although a Japanese card could be used with the HuCard converter I already mentioned earlier in this video. The $399.99 price tag meant that not many people upgraded their systems with a Turbo CD add-on, but that didn't stop NEC going ahead with the release for the new all-in-one model. Known as the PC Engine Duo in Japan, the Turbo Duo combined the TurboGrafx-16 with the Turbo CD in one very sexy looking unit, and was launched in North America in October 1992. However, as the TurboGrafx-16 was already in decline, the two enhanced models in the form of the Duo R and Duo RX never made it to Western shores, sadly. Before I start this entry, I should mention that I already produced an entire video on this very subject, with the story of the European TurboGrafx. So if you want the full lowdown on this, then please click the link in the top right hand corner or the description, as I'm only going to give a brief description of the subject here. After releasing their new console in North America, the next logical step for NEC was always a European PAL version, and indeed this was hinted at in the press from almost the moment the console debuted in Japan. NEC even took out adverts in British video game magazines trying to put people off buying imports, and told them to wait for the official model instead. NEC intended to release the machine in the UK, Germany and France initially in 1990, with other markets following in due course. As coverage was ramped up in the press, the first batch of consoles were quickly produced, games with multi-language boxes were made up, and everything was ready to ship. The European iteration would be grey instead of black in colour, had composite video output instead of RF as standard, and dropped the 16 part of the name. It would come bundled with blazing lasers and would be fully compatible with the North American model, but not the original Japanese PC engine. Well, unless you use the aforementioned converter, of course. Sadly, the disappointing sales of the TurboGrafx in North America put paid to the European release, which was suddenly cancelled despite everything being ready to go. All the stock was sold to regional distributors such as Telegames in the UK, and no further PAL consoles were ever produced. In March 1991, NEC reported that it had only sold 750,000 TurboGrafx-16 consoles in the United States, which was far below their own expectations. In an effort to relaunch the system into the North American market, in mid-1992, NEC and Hudson Soft transferred management of the system in this region to a new joint venture called Turbo Technologies. The first action of TTI was to release the aforementioned Turbo Duo in North America, hoping this would spark a revival in the TurboGrafx brand. However, the North American console gaming market continued to be dominated by the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo, with many retailers completely dropping support for the TurboGrafx altogether. This led to TTI creating the mail-order Turbo Club to help people source new games and accessories. They also developed a number of new games that would be exclusive to North America, including titles such as Tailspin, Darkwing Duck and Gunboat. In May 1994, Turbo Technologies announced that it was dropping all support for the TurboGrafx and Turbo Duo, although it would continue to offer repairs for existing units and provide ongoing software releases through independent companies in the US and Canada. When Konami announced they were releasing a TurboGrafx-16 Mini back in 2019, a lot of people were confused about how this had come about. It seemed to take a while for folks to connect the dots and work out just how Konami owned the rights to the historic hardware. So for those that still don't know how this came about, I'll break it down for you rather briefly. In the year 2000, PC Engine creators Hudson Soft were suffering from severe financial difficulties from the collapse of their main bank, and decided to list the company on the Japanese stock market to raise some investment. This would lead to Konami buying up huge amounts of this stock, and in 2001 they became the largest shareholder in the company. Then in 2005 they bought enough shares to take full control of Hudson and continued to run it as a separate studio until 2011, when they shut down the company, much to the ire of gamers worldwide. This takeover also gave them rights to all Hudson's IP too, so famous titles like Bomberman, Adventure Island and Bonk were now the property of Konami, as well as all, of course, ownership of the PC Engine hardware and the brand. Konami saw the huge popularity of MIDI consoles such as the Atari Flashback, NES Mini and the C64, and saw a great opportunity to grab a slice of that market.
Are you one of us? 16-bit graphics, or one of them? 8-bit. Us. CD game sound. Them, not. Us. them. Us. Turbo Express Portable. Us. Buy TurboGrafx-16 now and get one of 38 selected games free.
And that rounds up my look at 10 amazing pieces of trivia about the NEC TurboGrafx-16. Can you think of any other fascinating facts that should have made the list? And which one of these pieces of trivia is your favourite? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following patrons in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Mitchel, Valentino, Neptune, Seth Robinson, Carl Olsen, Ozzy B, D Vaughan, DOS Gamerman and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support all my creative endeavours, including this YouTube channel, then please go and check out my Patreon right now. You can get access to a host of extra content, including downloads, exclusive videos, creative insights and much more besides. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.